My ex-wife came out as lesbian and left me and my daughters 3 years ago, and now she's back. 3 years ago, my life changed in a way that I could never have imagined. If you had asked me before, I would have told you that everything was fine. My wife, the woman I had been with for over a decade, and I had built a life together. We had 2 beautiful daughters, a house we called home, and a future that felt secure. We were not perfect. No couple is, but I always believed we had a strong foundation. Little did I know that foundation was about to crack and crumble in an instant. It started with a quiet evening at home, a typical night when the kids were in their rooms, doing homework or watching TV, and we were simply relaxing. Then my wife asked if we could talk. I didn't think much of it. After all, we'd always been good about communicating. But when she sat me down on the couch and started talking, it felt like everything in my world was about to shift. She told me that she was a lesbian. She said that after years of trying to push down her feelings, she couldn't ignore them any longer. She had fallen in love with someone else, a woman from her workplace. My mind raced, trying to process her words. But it didn't make sense. How could this be happening? How could the woman I had known for so long, the woman I had loved and trusted, tell me she was leaving for someone else? And a woman at that. I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me, and I was falling into a free fall with no way to stop it. She explained that she needed to find herself. That being with me, with our family, no longer felt true to who she was. That being a wife and mother didn't fit with the person she had become. I was blindsided. I was angry. I was heartbroken. How could she just leave? We had spent years building a life together, raising our daughters, dealing with all the ups and downs that life had thrown at us. And now it was all falling apart because she wanted to find herself. Our daughters were 14 and 10 at the time. Sophie, the older one, was navigating the tumultuous teenage years, already dealing with the pressures of adolescent school, friendships, body image issues, and everything that comes with that. Lily, on the other hand, was still a little girl in many ways, so innocent and unaware of the complexities of life. She had no idea what was coming, and I tried to shield her from the pain as much as I could. Sophie, however, was more perceptive. She could sense something was off. She could see the tension in the air. But no one, not even I, could have predicted how much our lives were about to change. That night, my wife sat us all down. She apologized. She told the girls that she loved them, but she was leaving. She was in love with someone else, the woman from her office. I don't think the girls understood fully at first. They didn't know how to react. Sophie was hurt and confused, but she didn't quite grasp the weight of it all. Lily, still so young, was more focused on the fact that her mom was leaving and not coming back. The words didn't make sense to her. She just wanted everything to stay the same. But it wasn't. She told us that she had to leave to find herself, and there was nothing we could do to change it. She was gone the next day, leaving me standing in the ruins of a life I thought I knew. She took her belongings, packed a suitcase, and walked out the door. With her, she took not just the woman I had once known, but my sense of security, my sense of who I was. And most heartbreakingly, she took my daughter's sense of stability. I didn't know how to process it all. I didn't know how to explain to our daughters why their mother had left. They had questions I didn't have the answers to. Life as a single parent, the first few weeks after she left were a blur. I was in shock. I couldn't think straight. My mind raced in a million directions. I tried reaching out to her, but every call, every text, every attempt to get her to come back was met with silence. She completely cut us off. She refused to see the girls, refused to answer any of my questions. I couldn't understand how she could just walk away from everything we had built. We had a life together, a family. How could she just leave without a second thought? I had to become everything. I had to become both the mom and the dad. I had to take care of the girls, make sure they were getting to school on time, handle all the bills, all the logistics of daily life. I had to do all of it alone. I wasn't prepared for this. I had never imagined that I would be raising my daughters on my own. I thought we would always be a team, but now I was left to pick up the pieces. It was overwhelming. I didn't know where to start, what to do next. My world felt like it was falling apart. The first few months were incredibly difficult. I didn't have the time or energy to focus on myself. I had to focus on the girls. But inside, I was falling apart. I sank into a deep depression. I spent days in bed, unable to find the motivation to get up and face the day. I was so angry. I was angry at her for leaving us, for abandoning our family. I was angry at myself for not seeing the signs, for not knowing what was going on. I felt like I had failed as a husband, as a father. I thought about what I could have done differently, what I could have said to make her stay. But the truth was, nothing would have made a difference. She had already made her decision. But I couldn't stay in that dark place forever. The girls needed me. They didn't ask for this. They didn't ask for their mother to leave, for their family to fall apart. So I forced myself to pull it together. For them, I had to be strong. I started getting out of bed, taking care of the things I had to do. I found a better paying job to help make up for the lost income. It didn't heal the emotional wound she had left, but it gave us some stability. The girls were still struggling, but slowly, things started to settle. We adjusted to a new routine. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best we could do given the circumstances. The impact on my daughters, even as we tried to move forward, I couldn't ignore the effects it had on Sophie and Lily. Sophie, at 14, was angry. She didn't understand why her mother had left. She missed her, but she also resented her. There were nights when she would cry herself to sleep, and I would hold her, telling her it wasn't her fault. But it was hard for her to believe that. She had questions that I couldn't answer. She wanted to know why her mom had left, what she had done wrong. It tore me apart to see her hurting and not know how to fix it. Lily, who was so young, had an even harder time grasping the situation. She would ask me every night, "Are you going to leave me like Mom did?" It was the question that broke my heart every single time. I would promise her that I would never leave, that I loved her more than anything in the world. But the truth was, part of me wasn't sure anymore. I had been left once. What if it happened again? But despite the anger, the grief, and the overwhelming sense of loss, I couldn't let it consume me. I couldn't let my daughters see me fall apart completely. They needed me to be strong. They needed me to show them that even in the face of devastation, we could keep moving forward. As time passed, things started to improve, at least on the surface. We adjusted to a new life, but the pain didn't go away. The emptiness she left behind was always there, lurking just below the surface. But I kept moving forward. I kept doing the best I could for the girls, and we began to rebuild our lives. The lingering anger, despite the progress we had made, I couldn't shake the anger. The anger that she had left us, that she had walked away from her daughters without a second thought. I often wondered if she ever thought about them, about what her leaving had done to them. Did she ever stop to think about the pain she had caused? Did she ever feel guilty for abandoning them? I had no answers, and I realized that I would never get those answers. She had made her choice, and as much as I tried to move on, that anger would stay with me. But life went on, and so did I. For Sophie and Lily, I had to. I owed it to them to give them the best life I could. I couldn't let her absence define us. I couldn't let it tear us apart. The unexpected visit just a few weeks ago. Something happened that I never thought I'd experience, something that shook me to my core. My ex-wife showed up on our doorstep. After all these years, after everything that had happened, I thought I'd never have to see her again. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. And that day, she came knocking on the door of my new life. It was a few days before Christmas, and the atmosphere in the house was filled with a kind of peaceful chaos that only the holidays can bring. I was sitting on the couch in the living room, surrounded by my two daughters, as we discussed their Christmas wish lists. My oldest daughter, now 17, was sitting beside me, a notebook in her lap, scribbling down what she hoped to get. My youngest, at 13, was doing the same, but she kept looking up from her list, clearly excited about the approaching holidays. We were talking, laughing, and enjoying the moment. It was one of those rare instances where everything felt right in the world, and for a moment, I almost forgot all the hurt, all the years of distance. Then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I glanced at my daughters, who were still deep in their Christmas dreams, and excused myself to answer the door. When I opened it, I froze. There she was, my ex-wife, standing on the porch with a soft, expectant smile. It was as if nothing had ever happened, as if all the years of silence, all the pain and separation, had been erased in a single moment. She looked almost hopeful. "Hi," she said, her voice tentative. "It's been a long time. I've been thinking about you. I'm really happy to see you." I stood there for a few seconds, unsure of how to react. I hadn't seen her in years, hadn't heard from her in months, and here she was, standing on my doorstep, looking like she had every right to be there. She took a step forward, and I instinctively stepped back. She reached out to hug me, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I just couldn't. I kept the door firmly between us, my mind racing. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. She seemed to notice the distance between us, but instead of retreating, she simply smiled again, though her eyes held a glint of uncertainty. "I wanted to see the girls. I've missed them." At the mention of my daughters, I felt a pang in my chest. She had missed them. She had abandoned them for so many years, and now she wanted to come back? The anger started to boil beneath the surface, but I pushed it down, refusing to let her see it. Before I could respond, I heard footsteps behind me. My oldest daughter had come up behind me, curiosity evident in her eyes. When she saw her mother standing there, something in her snapped. Her face, usually calm and composed, twisted with raw fury. I had never seen her so angry. Without saying a word, she shoved past me and went right up to her mother. "I never want to see you again," she spat, her voice full of venom. "Leave us alone." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I watched my daughter, now grown and strong, face the woman who had abandoned her and her sister, who had left them behind without a second thought. My heart ached for her, for the pain she carried, for the anger that had been simmering under the surface for years. My youngest daughter, who had been in her room, came rushing down at the sound of the confrontation. When she saw her mother standing there, she froze for a second, and then her face hardened. She didn't say anything, she just turned and walked away, heading straight to her room. My oldest followed her, and I knew that they both needed space. I stood in the doorway, unsure of what to do. My ex-wife was still standing there, her face a mixture of hurt and confusion. "I know this is hard for you all," she said, her voice soft, but her words felt hollow. "I know I've made mistakes, but I want to fix things." I didn't say anything. I didn't know how to respond. What could I say to that? After everything? After all the years of abandonment and betrayal? The conversation with my daughters later that evening, after my daughters had calmed down, I decided to talk to them about what had happened. I sat down with them in the living room, trying to make sure they felt safe and heard. I explained that their mother had come by to apologize, that she was sorry for everything she had done, and that she wanted to make amends. I didn't know if that was true. I didn't know what her intentions were. But I wanted my daughters to feel like they had a choice, to decide for themselves if they wanted to see her again. My oldest daughter, her expression hardening as I spoke, shook her head firmly. "I can't forgive her," she said, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "She left us. She chose herself over us. And now she wants to come back because things aren't going the way she planned. No, Dad. We don't need her." Her words hit me like a wave of relief. It was as if all the years of doubt, of wondering whether I had been enough for them, of questioning my own ability to be both mother and father, had been erased in that single moment. She had chosen me. She had chosen us. "I don't want to see her again," my youngest daughter added, her voice quieter but just as resolute. "Seeing her today just reminded me of how much she hurt us. I don't want to go through that again." I could see the hurt in her eyes. The betrayal, the confusion, it was still there, and I knew that it would take a long time to heal. My ex-wife had left scars, and no apology could take those away. Not for my daughters. Not for me. A second visit the following days were filled with tension. I hoped that my ex-wife would take the hint and stay away. But then, a few days later, I heard shouting outside. My heart sank as I rushed to the window and saw my oldest daughter in a heated argument with my ex-wife. My daughter was yelling, her fists clenched, her face red with anger. And my ex-wife? She was pleading, trying to explain herself. I couldn't hear the words, but I could tell that my daughter was saying everything she had held back for years. She was telling her mother about the pain, the betrayal, the loneliness. She spoke about how I had struggled after she left, about how I had fought my own demons, all while trying to be strong for them. I stayed back, not wanting to intervene. This was her moment. This was her chance to speak her truth, to say everything that had been building up inside her. I wasn't going to take that away from her. As the argument continued, I noticed my youngest daughter, standing by the window, tears in her eyes. She couldn't bear to see this. She couldn't bear to see her mother, the woman who had abandoned them, standing there trying to justify her actions. I went to her, wrapping my arms around her, holding her close. She cried, and I comforted her, but I didn't stop my oldest from saying what she needed to say. She had a right to this. She had a right to speak up. After the confrontation ended, my oldest came to me, her eyes filled with tears, but also with a sense of release. "I'm glad I said it," she whispered, as if to herself. "I sent my ex-wife a message telling her, in no uncertain terms, that she was to leave us alone. If she ever showed up again, I would take legal action. I would get a restraining order. I couldn't let her hurt my daughters any more than she already had." The final straw. 3 days have passed since that confrontation. No word from her, no messages, no calls. I hoped it was over, that she would finally stay away. But deep down, I feared that wasn't the case. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was going to try again. And I was ready. Yesterday, my youngest came home from school, visibly shaken. She tried to talk to me, she said, her voice low. She was waiting outside my school, trying to talk to me, trying to give me a ride home. I felt my anger flare up again. My ex-wife had no right to be anywhere near my daughters. She said she wanted to talk about how she regretted everything, how she had tried to live her life without us. But it hadn't worked, my daughter continued. I didn't want to listen. I just wanted to go home. And then, as if the words had been waiting for years to be said, my daughter asked her mother the one question that cut to the heart of it all. If your life had worked out the way you wanted, would we have even mattered? Or were we just the backup plan? My ex-wife didn't answer. She couldn't. My daughter got out of the car and walked away, shaking her head. When she came home, we talked. She told me everything, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. I knew it wasn't over for her, that the scars of the past were still fresh. But I also knew that my daughter was strong, and I would always stand by her. A decision for the future. I've made my decision. I'll do whatever it takes to protect my daughters from the woman who abandoned them, from the woman who thinks she can waltz back into their lives without consequence. I'm getting a restraining order. She doesn't get another chance. She had her shot, and she blew it. My daughters don't need her. They have me, and that's enough. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this story resonated with you, and if it did, don't forget to show some love by liking this video. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on more emotional and impactful stories like this. Share this video with your friends or anyone who might relate or appreciate the message. Your support really helps us continue bringing these stories to life. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. Until next time, take care and stay strong.